Hello, welcome to my teacher librarian collaboration project. I did this collaboration project with Mrs. Farr, who is a fifth grade ELA teacher. Let's get started. We had four main goals for this. The first one was we wanted to create a collaborative lesson over Manifest Destiny. The first reason specifically for Manifest Destiny was students have a test in the upcoming week that we wanted to make sure the collaboration worked towards a test they were going to have and prepare them. Next, this is an essential standard, so we wanted, not only did I want to give her support in something that the students needed to know, but also she loved the idea of obtaining support for it. Lastly, we wanted to introduce a new form of technology to the students that students could definitely use as they continued on in their educational journey. Our collaboration process was several different steps. The first was the initial collaboration, which was back on March 27th. Was about 15 minutes. During this time, I inquired about the partnership. She obviously said yes. During the time, we asked what unit supports could be given. She gave some clarity on what she needed. We set up a time for our next meeting, very short and very sweet. Our second meeting was on April the 3rd. It took about 25 minutes. We divided roles, we set up norms, we gained that trust that we needed. Within that, we determine not only the social studies standard that we are going to use, which is 5.4C, which is all about Manifest Destiny. We also picked the ELA TEKs that would best support her essential standard. Next, we determined that within the lesson, we wanted close reading. We wanted to make sure students had high levels of collaboration and definitely hands-on activities. And then we determined that the next steps that we needed to do, and then determined that we were going to meet on the 9th of April. Our third meeting, which was the April the 9th, we had reviewed the resources that we individually had pooled. We made sure they met the accommodations of all of our students. We made sure that we had resources that supported EB support, which I'll get more into when I get to the actual presentation. We created the PowerPoint. Luckily, because we each had our own resources, we were able to shove them together pretty easily and make them work. Next, we determined who was going to lead certain roles and who was going to support, so we could flip-flop and really do a co-teach model. We had two final collaboration times. We had the lesson on the 10th and the 11th, which kind of we consider one time. We divided the lesson in half, and it spanned 2 days. So we co-taught the lesson, and throughout that, we both led and supported. So while she was leading, I was monitoring. And while I was leading, she was monitoring. Therefore, students got support in every aspect. Lastly, we had a post-conference. This allowed us to really just discuss what we thought was great, what may needed to be reconsidered for next time, looked at exit ticket data, and we determined we were going to create another collaborative lesson in May. A great way to end the school year. So while we were co-teaching, this is kind of how we set it up is I first led the Inquirer on Manifest Destiny. She then supported student collaboration, where they spoke about what their inquiry looked like. I led them through Britannica, which was a library resource. She led them through thinking critically with the graphic organizers, and we gave them two options. I then took over again, and I gave them the supports with hexagonal thinking, and lastly, she took the exit ticket. So with our different learners, we focused on three main groups. We had our EBs, we had the different accommodations for our SPED and 504s, and we had the different learning styles. For EBs, we had Britannica, and in Britannica we had that it offers translations. So students could translate it to their native language, which a few used. We also had the ability to level the text. So that way students could make it an easier text or a harder text just for what they needed. We had sentence stems all throughout the presentations. We had students being able to work with each other, so they had those peer language supports. For the accommodation sections, we had visual timers. We had a 2-minute timer, a 20-minute timer, just different timers so the students could visually see how much time they had. That really supported it. Once again, we had those sentence stems, leveling passages. Graphic organizers, we gave them choice, but the graphic organizers allowed them to chunk their information in different ways. We not only gave the instructions verbally, but they were also written, so students could both hear them and see them. And then students had the ability to use text-to-speech on different parts of the lesson. For the different learning styles, we really focused on verbal, that students could collaborate. It wasn't just talking, it was very supportive, helpful, academically rich conversation. For those auditory learners, we had collaboration, we had think, pair, share. We just had consistent time where they could listen to what people around them were talking about. For those students who need to physically read it or write it, we had transcribing answers. So not only would they eventually get to talk about it, but before they did that, they got to actually write them out. They got to use graphic organizers to help them organize their thoughts. Lastly, the kinesthetic, they got to move around and they got to move things with their hands. So they're getting to learn by physically moving the concepts around. This next section is all about how we evaluated. So the picture to the left shows students using Britannica. The first picture is a student trying to actually access it. The next one is a student actually, if you look very closely, it says Manifest Destiny. They're beginning to read, they're leveling it, just really using the resources. So one of the tools we had for the EBs was they could level the passage and they could translate. We found that many of the EBs did not keep it on Spanish or on, we had a couple Thai students, they did not keep it on their language. They would flip back and forth to support their learning needs, which we really liked, instead of just doing one or the other. Next, it really helped the students could click on unknown words, so that way they could focus on the passage, and then if they didn't know a word, they could click on it. It would bring them to what it really was, give them a picture, lead them back. Lastly, this website really helped students. Many of them actually referred back to it during hexagonal thinking. This would be the hexagonal thinking activity. Students really enjoyed it because they got to move around and then they got to physically connect the ideas. And we really had to encourage them to think outside the box. And while some of them were very unsure, it was cool seeing them pop out of the box and become confident. The quieter students opened up as we moved forward. They felt like they had the ability to share what they knew what was right without feeling someone was going to jump on top of them, which I really love, that supportive community. And then we also got to really shout out that there wasn't necessarily one right way. As long as each of the different parts connected, there were so many different thinking paths, and that was great to see. Couple reconsiderations. The first one is we did give them, we told them about the additional resources that if they went to Britannica, one of the tabs was after you read the passage and did all the work we expected, you could see additional resources. And we want students to use those more next time. So while they went back to the main passage we gave them, we want them to go back and use the other resources for some of those ideas that they didn't know quite how to expand. Also, those additional resources for the students who did use them, some of them got distracted, and instead of focusing on the activity, they started looking at the videos, the images. So finding a happy medium. Next, leveling of pieces. As a whole, we monitored, but we definitely need to make sure students are not leveling their pieces too low, because we had a couple students who took advantage of that, and we need to make sure that while that tool needs to be available, that students are really reading at their level, so that way they are supporting growth in their literacy. So we had content area teaks, and we have more of the library teak. So content teaks, we had 5 of them. The main teak was the social studies teak. The student is expected to identify concepts associated with Manifest Destiny. The language objective, I will read, speak, and write using terms about Manifest Destiny. And then we had 4 ELA teaks that went along with it. The first one was the student is expected to establish purpose for reading assigned and self-selected text. They had to do that with the Britannica article. The students can make connections to previous learning and other tasks. They did that in the inquiry-based activity at the very beginning. The student interacts with sources in meaningful ways, such as note-taking, annotating, free writing, or illustrating. They did that with the graphic organizers in the Britannica. They have the social studies teak that I've already gone over. And then the student is expected to use print or digital resources to determine meaning of unfamiliar words. They got to play with that and use that while in Britannica. The library teaks, we had IA2, recalling prior background knowledge